Let us start with these well-known moves. e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3, a6. 5 moves, and we reach a position that carries the name of a great player, Miguel Najdorf, and also just one of the lines in the open Sicilian. It's more complicated in many aspects than some of the openings. And while contemplating what would be our next journey, after we spend so much time looking at the mysteries of the classical Queen's Gambit, I was contemplating Najdorf, of course, as one of the options, one of the new destinations. But at one point I even got scared, because it's really big. And I recognize that it will be an immense task. Something similar to my work on the book series by great predecessors. Because it seems that we're in control. It seems that we are planning our work, dividing it into sections. But at the end of the day, if you want to produce something of high quality, you could be taken over by the complexity of this opening, by the ideas, the very wide range of ideas, and fantastic games played by the great players of the past. So, presenting Najdorf in its full beauty to your attention, I had to consider that it would take many hours of recording. So we'll start with some segments, and eventually we hope to cover all Najdorf, because it has sharp lines, very sharp lines, positional lines, mixture, number of advices that one could receive for white pieces. But of course we'll concentrate more on the black side, because as you know, I'm one of the faithful Najdorf supporters, and for nearly 30 years I'm proudly defending the colors of this great evergreen opening. You may expect a long series, plenty of DVDs, full of Najdorf, full of complications, full of great discoveries, great triumphs, and great failures. Because in Najdorf, the rating of the player, his actual strengths, sometimes, or even very often, gives no guarantee against a disaster. One wrong move, and you're out of business. And I experienced it in my own chess career. So let's start with general description. And I have to tell you that before we start analyzing games, looking at some concrete ideas, studying some typical examples, that the role of general information in that opening is far less important than in Ruy Lopez or in the Queen's Gambit. In the Queen's Gambit, you can learn through ideas. You can recognize that some patterns could be used in number of positions, and the consequences of tiny change in the position are not as deadly as it could be in Najdorf. But don't get me wrong, there is room for generalities in Najdorf. You have to learn from great games to know more about typical attacks launched by white and typical defense offered by black. But those generalities must be supported by a very deep analysis, by hard homework, and by very precise calculations. Because you could have a great position at first sight, everything would be perfect, but then there will be just one move, and you'll see some of these games, just one blow, and your position collapses, house of cards. Now, a little bit about the history of this opening. It's not very old by chess standards. It was not seen, according to the database information, in the 19th century. And one of the first games that we could look at, it's 1922 games between two strong players, Yates and Tartakover. And White played very cautiously, bishop d3, developing its bishop, preparing castle, protecting pawn on e4. Of course, this move doesn't offer much hope for the advantage. Just normal game. White could afford this, but for us, this game has only historical importance. Then Najdorf, or this pawn configuration with d6 and a6, was seen few more times in 20s and 30s. But it was Miguel Najdorf who played this opening with great dedication. And I think it's justified that this line in the Open Sicilian carries his name. Some may argue that he did very little. In his first game, he played with this opening in database, found in database, dated just back to 1939, where his opponent played bishop g5, and after e6, he reached normal position of the sharpest line in Najdorf with bishop g5. But Don Miguel was very consistent. He always played this opening. He was, I think it's fair to say, the first faithful follower of Najdorf. And that's why I don't think that we should argue that moves d6 and a6 in Sicilian are carrying Najdorf's name. But of course, Najdorf's role, also very important, was not decisive. And there is another name that anyone who plays chess, or anyone who has ever heard about the game of chess, knows by heart. The name of one of the greatest players in the history of chess, who was the first prophet of this opening, Robert Fischer, who played Najdorf from his early days in mid-50s to the last triumph of his career, World Championship match against Boris Spassky in Reykjavik in 1972. And that was Fischer. It was Bobby Fischer who made Najdorf part of virtually every major international competition. Thanks to Fischer, in many Najdorf lines, new ideas for black were discovered. And those lines survived decades. And even now, we're still living in many aspects in the framework proposed or indicated by Robert Fischer. Throughout our travel into these Najdorf jungles, we'll look at many games played by great players. And of course, if you had Fischer on one side, you can expect great names on the other side. It would be Keres, Spassky, Geller, Karpov, and many, many others. But Najdorf was very fluid. It's not the opening that stays frozen. Every day you have to check your database and to find out whether something new has happened. And of course, the introduction of computer into the opening preparation has changed the way we are handling Najdorf. Something that was doable 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, it cannot be tolerated anymore, because tiny inaccuracy in your preparation could end up with terrible disaster, and there will be no way back. Najdorf offers black a good chance to take initiative in the opening, but the price for this opportunity is very high, because you have to take huge risk that you normally don't take in other openings. But high risk often means high rewards. So we are entering this great opening. Well, we're entering positions where the value of the moves will be very high. But it's no surprise that most of the players who learned to play Najdorf in their early days stayed with this opening throughout their career. And even if they're not impressed by the complications and by the quality of the positions that normally arise in the middle game of that Sicilian line, I'm sure you will enjoy the history. You will enjoy Najdorf in all aspects. And even if you decide against employing this line, you will learn a lot, and it will help in your chess quest, even if you play quiet and more positional openings. So welcome in our new series.